Before the final season even started, there was this feeling hanging over Stranger Things that whatever this was building toward wasn't going to be loud. Not louder monsters, not higher stakes, just something heavier.
Hello? Hey. If you can hear this, you made it. This is Fiction Fan. Reaching you from somewhere. Between worlds. Don't go anywhere. The story is about to begin.
In my last video, I made a few predictions by following a pattern the show has been quietly laying down since season 1. It's about who the story tests, who it continues to revolve around, and who comes out the other side, changed or unchanged. A lot of that centered on Will, not because he's the strongest or because he has the most power, but because he's the one who went through something that should have erased him, but didn't. Now that we've seen 7 episodes, that pattern is harder to ignore. Not because the show explains it to us, but because it keeps repeating it. In the way Vecna builds his plan, in the people he gathers, and in the one person he never fully gets to keep. And that's what I want to talk about. Not what the show says is happening, but what it keeps showing us. About control, about survival, and about the mistake Vecna keeps making. So let's talk about what the show is actually doing, not what the characters are telling us is happening. Because season 5 isn't explaining its mythology through dialogue anymore. It's explaining it through patterns. Here's the first thing that stood out to me across all 7 episodes. And just quickly before we go any further, you should know that there will be major spoilers throughout this thesis. So if you don't want to ruin anything, if you haven't watched the current 7 episodes before the finale, please stop now, go and watch the episodes, and then come back before the finale. So, for the most part, Will doesn't get speeches. He doesn't get victory laps. He doesn't even get narrative punctuation. But the camera keeps finding him. In scenes where he says nothing, in moments where the plot technically belongs to someone else, in conversations that keep drifting back to his reactions, not his actions. That's not accidental. That's structural attention. The show is telling us that Will doesn't need to do more, because the story is already responding to him. And this has always been true. Even when Will was possessed in season 2, he wasn't the weapon, he was the terrain. Vecna didn't move through Will, he had to work around him. There's a line Will says to Joyce in season 5, I can't remember which episode, that keeps echoing in my mind. The idea that Vecna chose him because he was weak. But the season quietly dismantles that idea. That lie. Because if Will was weak, Vecna wouldn't still be trying to diminish him. Fear-mongering isn't something you do to something that's already broken. It's something you do to something you're trying to contain. Watch those scenes closely. Every time Vecna appears to Will now, the goal isn't control anymore. It's erosion. He undermines Will's confidence, reframes his survival as coincidence, tries to convince him he was expendable, that he had luck, not strength. But that's not dominance, that's insecurity. And then it happens. Will the Wise steps forward. Not loud, not reckless, but decisive. He wipes out the Demogorgons, and for the first time, the power dynamic flips. Not because Will is angrier, but because he's no longer afraid. And when Will snaps Vecna's leg, brutal, precise, and undeniable. That's the moment it clicks. For us, and honestly maybe for Vecna too. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a weak boy who survived by accident. This was someone Vecna never fully accounted for. Someone who adapted. Someone who resisted. Someone who couldn't be owned. And once you see that, you start to realize something terrifying. Vecna isn't trying to break Will anymore. He's trying to make sure Will never realizes just how dangerous he actually is. And this brings us to the 12 kids. By episode 7, we finally see the full shape of Vecna's current plan. 12 children, seated, arranged, participating in a ritual timed precisely to November 6, the day the barrier first broke. This isn't possession. This isn't improvisation. It's a system. Vecna didn't abandon Will because Will failed. He abandoned Will because Will couldn't be kept in line anymore. Will was the prototype, the proof of concept, the first successful traversal. But prototypes aren't scalable. Look at how the 12 are used. They aren't individuals. They aren't even characters, really. Or victims in the traditional sense. They're components. A distributed mind, a ritualized network, if you will. 12 minds acting as stabilizers, not bridges. The upside down isn't the destination, it's infrastructure, a wormhole, a conduit, a controlled overlap between Hawkins and something else. And Vecna doesn't need Will to open it anymore. The 12 kids are power. Will is proof that power isn't obedience. This is the part I think a lot of people miss. Vecna never stops watching Will. He never stops addressing him. He never stops trying to define him. You don't do that to something irrelevant. You do that to one variable you can't model. Vecna's entire philosophy is control through understanding. And Will is the one person who passed through the system and came back unowned. So here's where I think this is heading. The finale won't be about stopping the ritual. It won't be about closing the bridge. It won't even be about killing Vecna. Those mechanics are already in motion. The real conflict is this. Vecna believes multiplicity equals control. Will represents singularity without submission. The 12 kids allow Vecna to operate at scale. Will threatens the entire premise. Because if one mind can pass through, endure, and remain autonomous, then Vecna's future isn't inevitable. It's fragile. Will doesn't need a speech. He doesn't need a final blow. He doesn't need to be crowned anything. His role has always been simpler and far more dangerous. He is living proof that Vecna's system leaks, that fear doesn't always rewrite identity, that trauma doesn't always mean ownership, that survival doesn't require alignment. And that's why, no matter how many kids Vecna gathers, No matter how wide the bridge opens, Will Byers is still the problem he never solved. And if Will represents the flaw in Vecna's system, then everyone else represents the cost of trying to fix it. Let's start with 11, because across the 7 episodes, her arc isn't about power anymore. It's about containment. Not hers, the world's. The military doesn't want another 11. They want repeatable Henrys, which should terrify everyone, because Henry Creel wasn't a weapon that went wrong. He was a philosophy that honestly worked too well. And then there's Karli, and I'm just going to say it plainly. I don't trust that bitch. Not for a second. Calling Henry brother wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't trauma bonding. It was alignment. She insists on tagging along. She reframes sacrifice as inevitability. She keeps steering 11 toward the idea that dying is the only meaningful end. But here's the problem with that worldview. Karli has nothing left she wants to protect. 11 does, and Karli can't see the difference. She believes pain clarifies purpose. Henry believed the same thing. The military believes it too. And that's why Karli is dangerous. Not because she's evil, but because she's finished. Finished hoping. Finished building. Finished choosing life. When she tells 11 there's only one way this ends, what she's really saying is, there's only one way this ends for me. Now zoom out, because while gods and systems are colliding, the rest of the group is doing something quieter. They're remembering. Dustin and Steve's relationship has never been about comic relief. Although it has provided quite a bit, it's been the moral backbone of the show. Every Eddie reference this season has dropped isn't about nostalgia. It's about unresolved grief. When Steve says, "If you die, I die," that's not bravado. That's survivor's guilt with a spine. And I'm saying this now, out loud, to the universe. Steve or Dustin better not bloody die. Hopper's role this season is deceptively simple. He doesn't escalate, he stabilizes. Where others chase meaning, Hopper holds his ground. He's the reminder that the world worth saving is still small enough to touch. He's not fighting Vecna. He's fighting the idea that loss makes brutality justified. If you step back, a pattern emerges across all 7 episodes. No one is trying to win anymore. They're trying to prevent replacement. Replacement of identity. Replacement of choice. Replacement of humanity with efficiency. So that brings us to the last episode. The final hour. The end of Stranger Things. I don't think the finale ends with Vecna's death. I think it ends with his irrelevance. The bridge won't be closed by force. The ritual won't be undone by violence. It will fail because the system cannot account for contradiction. Will proves identity survives trauma. 11 proves power doesn't require cruelty. And the rest of the group proves love doesn't scale, but it endures. Vecna's future needs obedience, but this world keeps choosing each other instead. And whatever the final images, whatever explosion or silence or sacrifice we get, I don't think it'll be loud. Stranger Things has never ended its chapters with triumph. It ends them with survival. Still standing, still themselves, still here. This story doesn't end when the door closes. It ends when the people who walked through it refuse to become what was waiting on the other side. Whatever happens in the final episode, however this story chooses to end, it's going to be strange saying goodbye. Stranger Things has been more than a show. It's been a shared memory. Something we grew up with or grew back into. Something that reminded us what it felt like to be kids again. Sitting too close to the TV, half scared, half awestruck. And I think there's something meaningful about a story reaching its finish line. About letting it end while it still knows what it's saying. Before it keeps going just because it can. This will be my last Stranger Things video. Not because I've run out of things to say, but because the story deserves to land. So whatever the finale gives us, joy, heartbreak, silence, or something in between, I'm grateful we got to experience it together. I hope the days ahead treat you kindly. Wherever you are, whatever you celebrate, I wish you a peaceful holiday season, a safe end to the year, and something good to carry forward. And if you made it all the way to the end, thank you, truly. If you enjoyed this breakdown, give the video a like, subscribe for weekly fiction analysis and storytelling, and let me know in the comments what you think is coming in the finale. Until the next world, until the next story, take care and farewell.
Tune in next time for Fiction Fan TV.
Okay, I don't know what the hell is going on, or why I can't hear myself in this voice mod app, but it's bugging me.